In July of 2013, I saw an animal in southern Arizona, in Tucson. Uh, Technically outside the city limits, but Tucson area. That's not supposed to be here. According to science, it doesn't exist in Arizona. And any eyewitness reports are generally dismissed because there's no physical evidence or anything. Um, so having had an experience like this, you know, when I see things like Bigfoot stories and stuff like that, I'm not prepared to just dismiss it, right? Because I myself have seen an animal, albeit not a cryptid. It's an animal that is well documented to exist, but outside of its scientifically accepted range. And this is a thing that's annoyed me about science for a long time. I think this was actually one of the moments that kind of like cemented in my head as um, indicating that this is a real problem, right? Fundamentally, science is very solipsistic. It until someone with the exact right connections and the exact right method of demonstrating, uh, which usually relates to connections and money and things, demonstrating their point, science will not accept uh, claims of things, regardless of the quality of the evidence. Um, anyway, so yeah, basically it makes everybody out to seem like a liar if you're not going along with the mainstream, which is less than the best way to be, I think. Anyway, so the animal that I saw, um, I used to walk out into the desert, the state land behind the neighborhood that I lived in. The same neighborhood um, where the story of the Skinwalker actually is from. That same neighborhood, and that same wilderness out back behind. Um, though a slightly different part of it, different direction than where the Skinwalker went. Um, yeah, so I would regularly go out there, middle of the day. A lot of times with a with like a backpack with 70, 90, 110 pounds of worth of big rocks or something like that in there. Um, hike for a few miles, uh, and come back. And, you know. So I was doing that this day, and there was kind of I think at this point, based on the emails that I sent to people at this time and the things that I said, there was a point where I never really went past it because there was this kind of just little like drainage. It wasn't even a wash. It wasn't anything. It was barely just a depression in the surface that ran for probably 3/4 of a mile, and then just suddenly it opened up into this little cave, little canyon. It, Parts of it were kind of like a cave, um, and then that it went about 20 feet in the same direction as the little depression, and then it made an abrupt right 90 degree, pretty much 90-degree turn, and then that at this point I didn't know. I didn't know how this worked. Um, I discovered this after I saw this animal. Uh, and then that went for a little ways, and it meandered a little bit, it kind of curves a little bit, and then it again made a 90-degree bend roughly, so that it ends up in more or less the same direction as that original little drainage depression. So I would normally just kind of come up to the edge of that drop off because it was probably a 5 foot drop. So I'm 6 foot tall, so that's not an easy thing to go in and out of. And it was pretty much just like it's kind of like a rocky ledge, and then it's just kind of more or less a straight down drop, kind of rough. There's no real footholds or anything, so yeah. It wasn't easy to get in and out, and I wasn't prepared to, you know, to do that most days. Basically, I would just walk to this point and then walk back, and that was probably one way, probably a 2.5 mile walk. So total, we're looking at 4 to 5 mile walk in the middle of the day, and this is July, so that's about the hottest time of year, early monsoon season. That's yeah, that's kind of a punishing walk with 80, 90 pounds of rocks on your back. So yeah, I would usually just kind of that would be my landmark to turn around. So I'm just kind of walking along the little depression and mostly just looking down. I think I wasn't because by this point I'm like starting to get tired and I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm almost there, and then I just turn around and go back. Um, and I look up and just so like there's the drop off, and then there's kind of overhanging the little canyon thing. There's kind of a little ledge, but then there's a wall up above it. There's like this kind of hard. I'm not sure if it was rock, but it was like harder soil at least that didn't get eroded away. And sitting on this little ledge, and this ledge was, you know, maybe 1.5 to 2 feet, kind of depending on the area, and it kind of tucked back in some spots. Um, just kind of like sitting on this was a cat. And I had forgotten this, but reading accounts of it, which was very garbled because it was on social media, so it would just be like a sentence, somebody replied, and then I would give a little more information and things like that. It's not a clear like. There's nothing for me to read back to you because it's very garbled and yeah, interpolated with not interesting things. But in this record of the event, it indicates that once I realized this is my words were basically like this. Once I realized it wasn't a coyote, I said in a loud voice, "Oh shit!" And my recollection, I didn't say this, so this isn't recorded. So this is just my recollection as of now. Is because I see coyotes all the time. Like they don't pose a problem. They'll just whatever. My recollection is my next first thought was it's a cougar. Because like I now recognized it was a cat. And it just stared at me. Just stared at me for a moment. Stared straight at me. And then I think it was looking at me before I saw it, because I was looking down and I wasn't trying to walk quietly. It's kind of soft sand, so I wasn't making a lot of noise, but it's a cat and he was facing me, so like straight at me. The way he was sitting on this ledge, he was just facing straight down towards the direction I was coming. So I have every expectation that he saw me coming from a ways away. Or at least heard me. He probably heard me long before he saw me. So I say, "Oh shit," and I'm just looking at him, and he gets up and just casually turns around, and he's got this big long tail, Like for compared to the size of the head and the legs, this tail looks ridiculously huge. And that's when I was like, it's a jaguarundi. And part of my problem at this point too was I hadn't really ever been into this short little canyon, so I didn't have a great sense of scale of things. Like I wasn't sure how big he was, so at first I was like, is that a cougar? It kind of made more sense than like later on after I had explored this area and this became a normal part of my expeditions. Um, so yeah, he turns around and he just slowly walks away from me. He jumps down off the ledge down into the canyon. And I think at this point I couldn't really see him anymore, so I kind of like start creeping up and I just kind of see his tail disappear around the corner. Um, so I go ahead and follow him into the wash. I think. Wait, did I? Maybe I didn't. I know I went down into the wash, but that might have been the next day. I might have been a little freaked out. Did I go? I don't remember if I went that day or not. But when I did go down into the wash, I'm really feeling like it was that day, but I can't promise that. I might have just turned around and went home at that point. Um, but for the sake of the story, I'm going to say because it's not going to change anything ultimately. I'm just going to say that I went then because I might have. Um, I might have to look through documentation of that because I might have said it somewhere, whether I did or not. So I went down in. There was some point. It was either that day or the next day. I went down in and kind of like discovered this little canyon. I was like, this is crazy, and the ground level was at the shallowest point. I on my tiptoes I could just get my eye to ground level, but in most places it was higher than that, a little bit higher than that. So in most places it was, and in some places it was well higher than that. So in some places this little narrow canyon, which honestly, yeah, and it was about this wide. It was kind of a little, yeah, maybe a little like slot canyon or something. I don't know how you describe it. It's not very big. It didn't go very far. Maybe 20 feet in this one direction, and then on the bend it would go maybe another 15, 20 feet, and then it just kind of opened up. So, not very big. But when I rounded the corner, on the right hand side, just a little ways up, there was this sort of pocket that went back into the wall that was big enough that I could have probably gotten into this hole. And it kind of had some tree, like a tree root, like a living tree root, sort of protecting it and like with debris tangled up into it. So I kind of wonder if the cat was like that was a sleeping area because there was like a hole that would be big enough for this animal to get into, and the space inside was big enough for it to be back in there. So I kind of think it probably hung out there at least a little bit. I don't know if it was a regular home or what, but at least a little bit. And the subsequent day, this is definitely the day after I saw the animal. Um, I I started bringing a camera with me from then on, and I really, for the next couple months, I was really trying to get a picture of the animal. And there were a couple times I just got this sudden feeling like something was looking at me, and that actually happened on the walk when I first. So um, the reason that I looked up was that I had this feeling that something was looking at me, something was watching me, um, and yeah, it's just that weird, eerie, like who's watching me? What's going on? That that was what made me look up in the first place. And I had that feeling a couple more times when I was out there, but I couldn't consciously identify anything at any point. So I don't know if that feeling was, based on anything real that I just I couldn't figure out consciously where it was, what it was tied to. But there was one point I kind of just went off in sort of a random direction, and I got a really strong sense that there's this little kind of group of low trees, and I really got the sense that there was something there that was watching me, but I couldn't see anything when I looked at it and tried to figure it out consciously. So I don't know, but I did that next day after I had started bringing the camera. Because this is the sort of experience where you're like, I wish I had a camera. And there was absolutely enough time in that first encounter. There was enough time for me to have at least gotten one or two shots of the animal, even with the slow-ass camera that I had. Because he was not threatened by me. He did not care. It was more just like how a cat kind of gets annoyed and is like, well, since you're here, fuck off. I'm gonna go somewhere else. It's just this casual, like, nonchalant, like, I don't like your company kind of very, very much a cat sort of behavior, right? Yeah, so from then on, I brought the camera. And, and I went back down into, from then on, that was a normal part of my walk would be, my hike would be go down into this little thing and then explore further into it. And so we were at the early part of monsoon season. So there had been a little bit of rain. So these washes, there wasn't any standing water or anything, but the soil was muddy. It was basically like wet clay in most places. And there were some pretty clear prints. So I did get, that first day I got some pictures, and I set a quarter next to it so you can get a sense of the scale. And if you look at, you can tell the front feet from the rear feet. And if you look at what Jaguarundi prints look like, that's exactly it. That's exactly what they look like. And then the day after that, things had dried up a little bit more. So I went out and I did find another picture of the animal still in the area. Prints, but they're much shallower. They're a lot, because the soil is almost completely dry now. So it just kind of leaves a little faint impression, but he was still in the area. And for a couple more weeks, kind of off and on, every once in a while I would see prints of this animal. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that in Arizona, near Tucson, I saw a live Jaguarundi in the wild. So here's those photographs.